and welcome to Teaching Natural. My name's Dare. I'm a sixth-year high school English teacher in SoCal or Southern California. And this is not clickbait. Yes, my classroom setup, all the classrooms that I've had to set up, cost me over $5,000. Let's get into it. So I know some people want to know the full total straight out the gate. So the total of my classroom setup, all the classrooms that I've had to set up, so that is 3 classrooms so far. The total, not including labor, is $5,688.14. My own money. With labor, the total of my classroom setup is $7,206.14. Here's the breakdown. First, I'm going to talk about a little bit about me that will give some context to the spending and the mindset. Then I will go through kind of why I decided to do this video. I'll break down all of the things that I have bought, or at least 90% of the things that I've bought with a cost next to it. And then I'll have some tips for new teachers or veteran teachers, or really anyone who is looking at decorating a space. Starting off with about me. When I started teaching at 22 in 2017, I believe, I was living at home my first 2 years of teaching. And this was because I was saving up to go to Montana to do my master's program. And I was also saving up to be able to move to SoCal. And so I had the privilege of not having extensive bills because I was living at home. So my dad allowed me to save up a lot of money so that once I actually moved out, I would be okay on my own and I wouldn't have to spend all my money, waste it, and then move back in. So when I talk about my classroom setup costing over $5,000, keep in mind that this was not with, rent or a mortgage, gas, water, heating, electric, car payment, none of that, because my car was paid for, but I was saving up because I was living at home. The next thing about me is that I am child-free by choice. So I do not have children. I have no plans on having children. So again, when we talk about my spending habits, I only had to support myself. And then, if I would buy something for my dad here or there, doing that. But I did not have someone else who depended on me and my income for my livelihood. So that is another thing to consider for my spending when we talk about looking at my classroom. I also enjoy interior designing, and my classroom, I don't even want to calculate how many hours I spend in my classroom a school year. But because I knew my classroom was going to be a second home and really sometimes a first home, because let's face it, sometimes I spend way more hours at school than I actually spend at home. I wanted this space to be a place that brought me joy. I wanted to feel excitement and love and wonder in my classroom. I didn't want it to feel like a dungeon because I was going to be here all the time. Oh, I don't think I also said with the privilege of living at home, I was also born middle class, and with my income, I'm also middle class. So when I talk about the breakdown of how much I'm spending, I have disposable income. So as a 4th-year teacher, I decided we're going to really have to look at the budget because I knew I was moving to Southern California, and I knew that it was a more expensive city that I was going to live in than where I am from in Northern California. So I really did need to break down my budget, where my money was going, where were areas that I would be able to cut back if I got into a sticky situation, or cut back if it was in the summer. And I knew that constantly purchasing things for my classroom was just going to be unsustainable, whether I totaled up every single thing I ever bought for my classroom and the labor I used to build my classroom, or not. I just knew it was not going to be sustainable to constantly throw money at my classroom. But boy, when I started totaling it in my 4th year, there was some anxiety when I was seeing some of the prices. And then that delayed this kind of video my 5th year because I just didn't want to look at how much money I was spending. I mean, over $5,000, that's 2 months paycheck, not 2 months complete paycheck, but like that's a lot of money to be spending on just my classroom. So I wanted to look at my budget. Another thing is that I realized my first 2 years, I wasted a lot of money trying to get my classroom to look like a Pinterest classroom. I wasted money on things that I just did not use in the classroom. And if I had waited just a bit and actually like experienced teaching, I would have realized I don't actually need to buy this thing because it's going to get destroyed, or I'm not going to use it as often as I pictured myself when I justified the purchase. And I'll have a video coming on my best and worst purchases, which looks at some of my worst purchases are things that they're not bad. I just didn't use them. So the cost didn't justify the time that I spent with it. But so I really wanted to take a deep look at what I was actually using in my classroom, what I actually valued and was worth spending the money on, rather than just looking at, oh, this looks so beautiful on Pinterest, and purchasing it based on that. Another reason why I chose to do this video is because I don't see it a lot on YouTube. And, you know, you're trying to get your channel to stand out, but also I was noticing through all of these classroom setup videos, which I love. Classroom setup videos are my favorite thing to watch, and they are the thing that do the best on my channel. But I was noticing that I and other teachers were not talking about where we were getting the funds for the things we were purchasing. And I want to be more transparent about that reality of teaching so that newer teachers or teachers who are coming back into the workforce or even veteran teachers get some value and get some cold, hard numbers and some realistic looks at what these massive classroom setup videos cost.
Okay, so here is my spreadsheet that has mostly every single thing that I bought for my classroom. Or if I didn't specifically buy it for my classroom, then using it for my classroom was a significant factor in purchasing it. There's really only one item that applies to, but so we're going to go through here on this category of student supplies. I've spent a total of $1,713.66. Most of this is going to come from book orders. I'm an English teacher, so I have to have a classroom library. And so even though I did buy on like thrift books or Goodwill, things like that, obviously it does add up. And you'll see that we've got multiple book orders here where I'm ordering many different books, and you can see like the price of the books themselves individually is not a whole lot, but when you just multiply that by how many times I've had to buy books because either a new book comes out, I want to add diversity to my library, or sometimes students will take a book home and forget to return it, which I mean, I don't really mind as long as they're reading it. I love that, but that means I do have to continue to replace books in my library. And then once we get down to the bottom, you'll see here some things that I bought for costumes for when we do Shakespeare or Romeo and Juliet, or Macbeth, you know, all those kind of plays that we do, because the costumes, like it gets them interested in drama and theater, and they absolutely love putting on the costumes. But, you know, these things do cost money to make it engaging, make them love it, and make them interested in theater. Then we go over to my organization. So you'll see things like 10 drawer carts, the 5 drawer cart, all of the different kind of organizational tools that I continuously use in my classroom. And this category is significantly lower, obviously, because it's meant to hold multiple things, but still comes up to $529. My teacher supplies is my largest category, and that comes out to $2,786.68. And I already see that that's not the actual total because I have gotten multiple packs of erasable pens. So that is something that is going to be different. But having a lot of the laminator sheets there, the priciest thing is my Epson printer. And I 1000% recommend this printer. It's number one on my best teacher supplies. And again, that video is coming out soon. But it is an EcoTank printer, which means that the printer itself costs a whole lot of money, but the ink itself does not cost a lot of money and lasts a long time. I have had this printer now for 3 years. I have never bought ink for it. I am still, within this 3 years, using the ink that came with the printer. And it comes in a big old, not can, bottle. That's the word I'm looking for. And you just, keep filling it. So yeah, to this day, 3 years later, I still have not bought ink for this printer. And as an English teacher, I am printing a whole lot of worksheets and papers and things like that to take to school to copy. And then everything you see printed in my classroom, so like labels or signs, anything like that, I printed off that printer. So it basically is like a Cricut for me. And so, yes, that printer is my personal printer that I use in my home, but most of the things, my first few years since I moved and getting my classroom together has all been printed on that printer. And then of course you'll see my laminators, my guillotine. I do need to buy another guillotine cutter, so that's something that's already going to add a price there. But as we continue, you'll see just all of these things that I have. Another thing that is quite pricey, and again, I will talk about it in my best purchases, is my iPad mini. Absolutely love that. And then, all the gadgets that come with an iPad and the Apple Pen. And then something you will also see in my best purchases are my Whitebook pads. They are basically giant easel Post-it notes, but they're dry erase and they're super heavy duty, which is great since I teach the same thing 5 times a day because I have 5 different classes of the same class. And so again, when I do my best purchases, I will totally talk about those Whitebooks and how I use them. Classroom appearance is kind of all the stuff that I use to make my classroom pretty/functional. And that category total is $687.79. So of course we've got our bulletin board paper, the lanterns that are hanging, the fish wire that I use to hang them, bulletin borders. And then we've got, the spray paints that I use to color coordinate everything. That got a little pricey. When I painted my bookshelves, that had a nice little price to it. Glitter duct tape. I forgot I even purchased this. This needs to go on my worst list because good grief, I thought it was going to be so cute and it just a mess. Bunch of command strips, spray paint again. So nothing outrageous on this list, just buying multiples of things that add the cost. Now here is a cost that some people might not factor in, but when I call setup, and really I should call setup labor, this is not even counting when people came to help me, but this is if I were getting paid my daily rate as a teacher for the hours that I worked to set up my classroom. It adds up. So the multiple schools that I have been at and had to spend days, or this is even, if I'm at the same school, but it's a different year. All in all, I have had 3 different classrooms. So I totaled up the hours that it took me, over those days, the hours that I spent. And if I was doing it on my contract hours, I would be making bank, especially the first time I had to set up one of these classrooms, and it took me 6 days because it was during the pandemic, so no one could come in and help me. I had to do it all by myself. And so, yeah, that is something that isn't really taken into account, is that when you're working off of your contract hours as a teacher, you're not getting paid. But if you were doing that labor on your contract hours, or if you were able to put into your principal and ask to get paid for those hours, it adds up. It'd be an extra $1,500 for me. So that's also something to take into consideration, is the labor cost of not just yourself, but of the other people. And then, oh shoot, I forgot to put it on here, but I bought pizza every time somebody was able to help me set up my classroom. I bought them pizza, or I bought them lunch to say, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And so that is something that isn't really considered when you see these multiple day setups, is that we're not on contract hours and what we could be getting paid if we were doing it on our contract hours. For more information about how teachers get paid, I have a video exactly on teacher salaries, so you can check that out on my channel. So here are the totals. For every material thing that I have bought for my classroom that I can remember to log was $5,717.13. And the total for my classroom, that is materials plus labor, comes up to $7,235.13. Yikes. That's a lot of money.
Now that we've looked at the breakdown of the numbers, I want to kind of talk about what I found out in doing this. Number one, I realized that in my participation in classroom setup videos, that I was also setting very unrealistic expectations for first-year teachers in the way that I went about it. And I think other classroom setup videos, though I love them, they are also setting up some unrealistic expectations, because as a new teacher, you're just not making enough money, nor should it be a requirement that you spend your money in this way to do these elaborate classroom decorations. And honestly, my decorations aren't even that elaborate compared to other teachers that I love to follow and I love to watch. But I just think it is overwhelming to kind of put that out there for a first-year teacher. But even some veteran teachers, like maybe that is also putting pressure on them to feel like a good teacher because their classroom isn't set up the way they're seeing on social media. And so I wanted to be very clear that I have to start expressing when I do classroom setup that it's not classroom setup that makes someone a good teacher, though we do enjoy it and though I love it very, very dearly. And it's the thing that stops me from feeling burnt out. It's the thing that gives me hope in the end of May and June. I want to be clear that I am not a good teacher because my classroom is set up a certain way. I also realized that in my participation of this, I am exacerbating the disparity between Title I schools, or schools that have more free and reduced lunch, lower income, and middle class schools and upper class schools. In my ability to spend money like this and make my classroom look like this, in highlighting this, I am exemplifying the class differences and the wealth inequalities in education, because a lot of teachers don't get paid like I do. They don't have the ability to spend this much on a classroom. And as I was looking at this, I was wondering what impact might I be having on students who are in Title I schools, which I have always worked in a Title I school. I have never worked in a upper class school. But for other students who might be watching classroom setup and might be watching how other teachers are putting together these elaborate classrooms, psychologically, what might that be doing to them when they walk into lower income schools and they see that these schools don't look like that? I'm thinking of starting a series called Off the Top, things that I would just study if I was going to do a PhD program. And I think classroom setup and kind of that look and the money that teachers spend on their classroom, and then from the student perspective, I think that might be a valid dissertation to research and to write about. And again, this is not to shame anyone at all, but I did want to take a look at myself and constant state of practice, be evaluating where I put my effort and where I put my money and what that might be saying in a greater social conversation and a greater social context. And with this conversation of what classrooms look like, how might I be negatively impacting that conversation and how might I be positively impacting that conversation? And I hope this video is a way that I am positively impacting by looking at finances and by explicitly telling others that you don't have to spend as much money. Please don't spend as much money as I did on your classroom, because while it is a fun, loving part of teaching, it is not the end all be all of what's going to make a good or bad teacher. With that being said, let's get into some tips I have for saving money / what I would have done differently my first 1-2 years of teaching and what I know better now. So these money saving tips are not in any particular order because I just wrote them down as they were coming to the top of my head. But multi-use items / things that can be repurposed if your theme changes. There are some things in my classroom that are quite specific, and there are some things that I can easily spray paint over them if I need to. But when you're looking at your classroom, think about if you suddenly no longer liked this thing anymore, or this theme or this color, how could you repurpose it in your classroom? Or if you bought an item, can you repurpose it for multiple different ways, multiple different grade levels, multiple different subjects? Because the more uses you can get out of something, or the easier it is to change it, the more money you will save down the long term, because you're not rebuying the same thing, a whole bunch of times, or you didn't change a subject or change a grade level and now you have to completely redo your classroom because it doesn't fit where you are now, or you have to throw away those items because it no longer fits what you teach now. Another thing, wait. I know the beginning of the year, you want to get that Amazon Prime Day going. You want to have everything perfect, ready in your classroom. But give yourself time to observe what you actually use, what actually works in your classroom, the movement of your classroom, the atmosphere of your classroom with students, because that changes every single class / every single year. So you might think, oh, I'm really going to use like those big Post-it note easel boards. And those are one of the things that's on my worst purchases. And then you realize financially, this is not a bang for my buck, or you only use it with one lesson and it just sits there for the rest of the school year. So here's a tip that many a budgeting person / many a shopping person tells you. Put it in your cart or put it on a wish list or something like that. And if you find yourself in 6 months, oh yeah, I still want that item, I know how I'll use it. Or if you find yourself throughout the year, 3 or 4 times saying, darn it, I wish I had had this thing, then it might be okay to purchase it because you have really thought through the times that you would use it and you really see a need for it in your classroom. That will definitely save you money. And when we get to the worst items, I'm really plugging this video, aren't I? When I get to the worst items that I bought, you're going to see a lot of things that they're bad because I didn't have a consistent use for them, or I bought it at the beginning thinking that I was going to use it and never touched it throughout the year. Another thing, raid the supply closet, okay? Every school has this is where we keep the paper and the pens and the expo markers. If you don't raid that closet, obviously don't take everything, but I never buy school supplies anymore until I go to that closet and see, note cards, here we go. Pencils, there we are. read that first, and then you'll really get a look at, one, the things that your department or your school might regularly buy, so you don't need to buy. And also, you'll know you don't need to buy it because you were able to get a whole bunch of stash of those things. Ask a veteran teacher or a retiring teacher, what are some things that they are getting rid of, or things that they don't want anymore, or things that they're letting go because they're retiring. You might find some really good stuff that you can spray paint or repurpose, or you might just like it exactly how it is. So veteran teachers and retiring teachers might have some really good things, especially, school supplies type things that they will just let you have. Or, if it's a bookcase they bought or something like that, you might be able to get it for a much lower price than if you were to go out and buy it on your own. Something I wish I had been comfortable with my first 2 years is asking my principal or department chair or my school secretary if there is an allowance for teachers. Now, my first 2 years, I knew that the school I was teaching at, my alma mater, was not going to be the school that I was at forever because I wanted to move. I wanted to see more of the world. And so I bought a lot of the things my first 2 years because I did not want to be financially indebted to my school, and I did not want my school to say, oh, you can't take these things because you use school funds for it. So now that I'm in a city that I love and can see myself in for a while, and have already bought a lot of the things that I can take with me all the time, I would ask my principal, secretary, department chair, can you buy these binders for me? Can you buy these folders for me? Can you buy this, that, and the other? Flexible seating, I know, is something that's really popular. So maybe asking, are there funds available so that we can get this or that? You never know until you try. And if you end up having to switch schools or something, you never know. They might let you keep that stuff, or they might not even remember that they bought it for you and you can take it with you. And if you have to leave it, that sucks, but at least it's something that you got value out of, so it will be worth buying at your next school or personally buying so that you can take it with you. I would also ask your parent-teacher association or parent-teacher guardian association, your PTA, if they do reimbursements, because sometimes a PTA might be able to sponsor a certain thing so that you don't have to spend all of your money upfront, or you can get reimbursed for a certain amount of money, which might help you budget better. If you can only get reimbursed for $150, that will help you kind of prioritize what you really need in your classroom, what you are willing to spend your own money on versus what you actually don't need or you can get from somewhere else. Ask your tax prep person, if you keep receipts or things like that, what can you write off so that you can get some of that money back. The next thing I would do that I did not do, set a budget. Even if you are someone who does not like numbers, does not like math, feels restricted by a budget, please have some sort of expectation or guideline for how much you want to spend and try your best to stick to that. It might not be, name brand flare pens. You might have to go with Dollar Tree flare pens. You might have to go with Rose Art or something that is not Crayola. Obviously something that works, because if it doesn't work, then you just wasted your money. But by setting a budget and trying your best to stick to it, obviously you will better use your money, better save, and make sure that you're still getting the things that you needed for your classroom, but you aren't completely breaking the bank or going into debt in order to get those things for your classroom. Actually, this is kind of the first thing I would recommend is draw out your classroom. Walk through your classroom like a student, because there might be some things that you think, oh, this is going to be great, this is going to be amazing, but for your students, it might impede their ability to get to their desks or put down their backpack, or the things on the walls might be too much for your students. It might be overstimulating. Your walls are your second teacher, so when they zone out, you want them to be zoning out on something that has some importance, but you don't want to overwhelm them with color or with writing that is too small, they can't even read it, or it's in a place that is just not beneficial for them. And so you want to test those things out before you really go and spend your money, because again, you don't want to waste your money, especially not in this economy. So draw it out, pretend you are a student for an hour, focus on or see what you zone out on, what calls your attention, and how you can move through your classroom space to make sure that the things that you purchase are functional. Yes, obviously you want them to be aesthetically pleasing, but it's really got to be functional in your classroom. Another tip I have, this is like the second to the last tip, is price match. Amazon might get it to you fast, but it might not be the cheapest or most affordable. Goodwill might have some really good things, or the Container Store might be better, or Learning Center. Those can get really pricey. So see if there is something comparable that you can price match it to, and then ask the store if they do price matching. Say, I found this through the company, because usually they won't price match a third-party seller on Amazon, but say like, you found it here for cheaper. Can you work with me? What else can you do? Staples, Office Depot has this for, Staples, what can you do? Walmart, what can you do? Target, what can you do? You never know until you ask. And if you say you're a teacher, a manager might have a bit more flexibility or a bit more power to help you out. And if not, then they might say, hey, this item is going to go on sale in a few weeks. Wait and come back. You can get it cheaper. So price matching, couponing, all of those things, please, 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 please try your best to do them. Even if it might make you feel, socially awkward or uncomfortable, or you might be like, oh, I don't want to make them think that you're broke. It's saving you money. And then you can use that money to do other things or buy other things for yourself or your classroom. And the last tip are donations. Ask for donations. I think Kyle Cohen is his name. He did like a book bingo where he said like, hey, if you can, purchase one of the books so that I can have a diverse classroom library. And so the people who supported him were able to do the bingo board buying different books so that he could have a classroom library. I've never done Donors Choose before, but Donors Choose is always an option. I think TPT had something that's getting kind of like Donors Choose. Look it up, try it out, that might work. But also you can ask businesses around your school, hey, Staples, that is, down the street, I'm a teacher. Do you have any extra filing folders or pencil boxes or glue sticks, anything like that you can donate to my classroom, because it's a tax write-off for them, but obviously like they just want to support kids and they want kids to have a good education. But doing a neighborhood drive for school supplies for your students, asking your friends and family to support your Amazon wish list, anything like that, asking for donations, please, please, please don't be afraid to do so, because one, your family and friends and your found family and friends, they are going to want to support you, and businesses are going to want to support kids. They might not be able to get you everything, but they might be able to say, I can get you this much, or they might say, I know a person who is willing to do X, Y, or Z, or who has X, Y, or Z. They might even say that they can donate time to help you set up your classroom. And then that's something that is taken off your plate, is by having multiple people donate time or donate resources or donate who they know who might be able to help you. So that's the end of my tips and tricks, but most of all, that's the end of this video. I'd like to turn this kind of into a teacher tag. Maybe some people might feel comfortable sharing how much they've spent. Maybe not, all in a whole year, but they might say this is how much they spent on their teacher supplies versus their student supplies or organization. They might talk about their best and worst purchases and how their money affected that. Either way, let's just try to be a bit more transparent about how teachers are spending their money for classroom setup, or where the funding is coming from if it's not a teacher spending their own money. Again, video is not meant to shame anyone. So if you love classroom setup, keep doing what you're doing. If you hate classroom setup, keep doing what you're doing, or find somebody who, like me, who does love it and who can help you set up your classroom. But either way, classroom setup is just a fun, loving part of teaching. It is not the end all be all, and no one should feel like they have to live up to some fantasy expectation of what a classroom is supposed to look like when your students walk in. At the end of the day, all your students need is a teacher who cares, who has taken care of themselves and is healthy and mentally in the right spot, and a teacher who is willing to go to bat for their students the best they can. In the meantime and in between time, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.